Good evening. My name is Megan Castillo. I'm Town Hall's program manager. On behalf of the staff at Town Hall Seattle and our presenting partner, Gage Academy of Art, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our presentation with Annie Hahn and Daniel Mihalyo of Lead Pencil Studio with Gary Fagan. As we get underway, I would like to acknowledge our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continued use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. We are so glad to have you join us tonight. The presentation will run about 60 minutes, including Q&A. To submit your questions for the Q&A portion of the event, please enter meet.ps/leadpencil or scan the QR code right now on the screen with your smartphone. We'll drop this link in the chat and remind folks where to go when we get to Q&A. We can't guarantee that we'll be able to address every question, but we'll try to get to as many as possible. You can help us by keeping your question concise. For those who would like to view the program with closed captions, click the CC button at the bottom right corner of the video player. Town Hall is adding new events and podcasts every day, including several upcoming events that will be held live at Town Hall. Katie Ives and Allison Williams will discuss imaginary peaks, the Reisenstein hoax, and other mountain dreams. We're also thrilled to host Nono Boy, a musician who's redefining folk through Asian American history. Visit our website or join our email list for the latest updates. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. As a part of our Arts and Culture series, this event is supported by For Culture, Arts Fund, City of Seattle Arts and Culture, and Washington State Art Commission. Town Hall is also a member-supported organization, so I'd like to thank all of our members who joined us tonight. If you share in Town Hall's goal of a community energized and empowered by considering questions of politics, science, and culture, please consider supporting us by becoming a member. You'll find membership information on our website. And now, please join me in welcoming Gary Fagan.
Thanks. Thanks, Megan. And thanks for joining us tonight. And I'm still getting my sea legs. I've done several programs here, but not since the space has been so transformed. So I'm still getting used to it. And the technology, everything's just super state-of-the-art. Anyway, I'm very excited to be doing this program tonight. Gage feels that having a healthy arts community in general serves our student population, as well as our artist instructors, in a way that is super beneficial. And that's why we're so excited to be doing programs like this, just to get the arts out there in the community and to encourage this sort of conversation. So we're really excited to be introducing Dan and Annie. I've been following their work for years. Years ago, they had an installation at the Henry. And it's very interesting, architects having a show of what was essentially installation at a museum. And I could go on and on about their projects, their awards, their residencies. Fun fact, they met when they were architecture students at the University of Oregon. And they have been partners ever since. And Lead Pencil Studio, of course, is their partnership. But I think my favorite thing to say about them, by way of my introduction, is back in the day, there was no such thing as architects or artists. The specialization back in the Renaissance didn't exist. And so somebody like Leonardo, he just did it all. Michelangelo did it all. Bernini did it all. Was he a sculptor? Was he an architect? Yes to all of the above. And so what's true about Lead Pencil is that they also cross all the boundaries. Are they sculptors? Yes. Are they architects? Yes. Are they installation artists? Yes. Check, check, check. And when we were talking about the slideshow, oh, thanks, Annie, I said, the drawing that you did at the Fry, which I assume is owned by the Fry, that drawing that they commissioned? No. Okay, it's still available. Well, hey. Anyway, the drawing of theirs that I saw at the Fry as part of the Stranger Genius show, because yes, they won one of the Stranger Genius Awards, was one of the more gorgeous charcoal drawings I've ever seen. And so I said, can you please include a couple drawings in your slideshow tonight? And they did. So anyway, I'm super excited to be talking to them about their work. And of course, we also know that the new University District station on the light rail line has their giant installation, Brooklyn Fragment, and we're going to end with that. Anyway, so thank you for joining us, and let's get started. So here is, they're wearing their architect hat. So you want to talk to us about this project, which unfortunately I didn't get to see, although I was close to it. It's like South Lake Union, right? Sort of Fairview, Denny area.
Yeah, that project is one block kind of north of REI. And I think it's called the Sitka Apartments. It's a very handsome residential project. I think it was developed by Vulcan. And we sort of inherited the project in a way. They wanted to do a barbecue hut platform, I guess, with a shed over it in the middle of the courtyard. And Vulcan, as you may know, is pretty progressive. On every building, they offer an art opportunity, and they select artists to do great commissions. And so we're very grateful for that. This one was an opportunity to do a piece on a column that already was planned. So that column, goes through the parking garage, 7 floors or something like that below grade. And we were offered the opportunity to build something on it. And so that's what this project was. It was, I think, Annie, what was the title in the end?
I think they wanted to do a treehouse. Architect had an idea when they came up with the concept for the building, and they wanted to do a treehouse. And I think it was an abstract of an idea. It's just that they got excited about it. And when we arrived at the site, there was not a single tree, just because it's a new development. So we said, well, it's hard to make a tree house without any trees, so why don't we come up with a concept that is based on that? So we wanted to kind of do a section of an island, so we called it an island treehouse. We sort of made up a title, and so you can kind of see it's a section of an island, sort of a made-up island. And we took this opportunity to do something that was a hybrid between architecture and art. So we wanted to provide a space that people who enjoy the space, 9 months out of the year, it's like today, right? Rainy and cold. And so as much as it's nice to have an open space in summertime, we knew that 9 months out of the year that you had to be in a space that it could be warm and you can sit and hang out for a while. So we created a lot of problem, I think, just by making a small architecture, and had to kind of answer to building department and all that. But there's a little fireplace inside. There's a little booth you can sit around. We just want it to be a little hideout from the apartment complex, so you can kind of get away and hang out there looking out to their courtyard and sort of beautiful garden they have designed.
So they put up that column, but they didn't know exactly what was going to go on it?
I think architects had an idea of, they wanted to do the design, the whole thing, I think, if it were up to them. But I think the Vulcan wanted to commission an artist to do that portion of it, which is sort of, nice and interesting to bring another discipline into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now this next set of slides is for all of you who are saying, who see Tacoma as the, as a sort of stepsister of Seattle. I mean, I am so knocked out by this project and what this organization is doing. So tell us about the project and the organization.
I start. Yeah. So we loved Tacoma and love Tacoma. When we first moved here, we really couldn't afford to get our own place, so we were thinking about moving to Tacoma. So we spent a lot of time down there looking at properties and looking at buildings and studio space. And then there was an opportunity for us to help this group of artists and somebody who wanted to do sort of a charitable work to find a building that could have art events and cafes and music. They didn't really have a specific idea, but they wanted to have sort of a cultural sort of institution. So they found a building and they showed it to us, and we thought, I think you can find better buildings. So they actually engaged us from the beginning. So we found this building together. I wish I had the before picture because it looked quite different. And we cut a big kind of center window out there. And we sort of started talking about what it needed to be. And we ended up doing, there's a 300 capacity, I think, 500 capacity, sorry, music venue there. There are 3 bars, a restaurant, a cafe, a visual arts sort of display area, rooftop garden. There's a lot that was empty next door that we talked them into purchasing. It was a asphalt parking lot that turned into a sort of urban garden. So it became a sort of a cultural institution that had events there, night markets, all kinds of activities. And it was just fun to work with the 3 local Tacoma folks. A couple of them were musicians. And so it's sort of a fun architecture project of rehabbing the building that existed and adding and altering the structure.
It's called Alma Mater, ALMAMATER. I really urge you to go onto their website. I mean, it's enough to make you want to move to Tacoma.
I highly encourage it.
Yeah, and they also have a strong social justice and indigenous aspect to their mission as well, judging from their website.
I have to drop a little name there. I think one of the first bands that came and had a show there were, I think, Deep Sea Divers. And we got to see their show, and they loved the space so much, they came back and recorded their next album there, which was kind of fun to be part of that.
Yeah, I mean, this project combines, glamour and urban living at its best with a strong social justice mission. I mean, what's not to like? And, it's sort of like a version of kind of Town Hall and Discovery and, the Daybreak Star Center and, the Rebar, kind of all rolled into one. And you guys actually build some of this stuff, right? Some of this stuff you've actually fabricated.
We did, yeah. This was a hands-on project. It took 4 years, I think, from start to finish. And we were involved heavily in almost everything, everywhere, and built like little pieces that we felt like we could squeeze it in where maybe the general contractor couldn't fit it in the budget. So there was a lot of fabrication on small parts.
Boy, they lucked out. Okay, so now we go on to the LiDAR section of the program. Why don't you talk to us about the scan and the trees and so on?
All right, well, so this takes a little bit of an introduction. If the audience, anybody is not familiar with this developing technology that was known as LiDAR, also known as laser scanning. LiDAR is an acronym for laser infrared detection and ranging. And I'm sure you've all seen by now laser measuring devices where you push the button and it sends a pulse out, and then what happens is infrared waves come back from that surface, and there's a sensor. It's very sensitive, and it says how far away that the object is that the laser hit. So this device was developed in the 90s by a company called Cyrax in Southern California to help industries like geology and mining industries and petroleum industries map 3D space. So it's that device of measuring, but it does it hundreds of thousands of times per second. And it's a big surveyor piece of equipment that at that time required a generator and a laptop to travel with you. And you would need to set it up, scan an environment in 3D, and then it wouldn't be able to know anything behind you, say the audience member, so you'd have to go set it up behind to get the backs, and then you could stitch the two worlds together, and you could keep doing that ad infinitum and create entire three-dimensional worlds. So we were probably among the first artists to ask the company for permission to use this equipment for a fellowship idea that we had in Rome. And so we applied, we got the award, but we didn't get permission to use the equipment. So we were a little nervous. We went to Rome, not knowing if the people from Leica Corporation, who now owned it, like Leica Cameras, would allow us to use the equipment, but they were very generous, and they let us have it for a few months while we were in Rome. They trained us how to use it, and then also on the software. And then we began kind of a long journey, beginning in 2007, of using this equipment for lots of different projects. And once we understood what it could do, it just opened up a whole world for us. So the slide you're looking at now is, I guess, 12 years later. We just did this project. It's a scan of an old-growth forest in Oregon. That's actually the largest Douglas fir tree known that's still living. It's like 12 foot in diameter, and surrounded by clear cuts in the middle of southern Oregon forest. It's called the donor fir tree. So this is just us sort of like researching, okay, what else does it see? Because we've been scanning cities for a long time and using it for lots of projects, and we decided to turn it in the forest and see, well, what is the space of the forest, and what sorts of things would this sort of machine vision see, and then take that data and start to do projects with it. So this turned into several projects.
I think when we started the Rome project, we knew that we were going to scan Rome, the eternal city of Rome, and we wanted to do a tri-city scan. So Rome was, easy one because we were there for a year, and then second city we knew that we wanted to do in New York, and third city we thought it was going to be somewhere in the West Coast, possibly Seattle. But I think just comparing cityscapes and structures between Rome and New York, there wasn't something really distinguishingly different in Seattle architecturally. So we were just thinking about what is it about this region that is so glaringly different than those two cities. And of course, it's the landscape and the beautiful Douglas fir trees we have, and all the spruce trees and cedar trees. So we kind of took our scanning work away from the city and started looking at landscape. And I think with all the research work, you kind of go into the direction thinking something is intriguing, not knowing exactly what you're going to produce. And so we'll show you a couple projects that came out of this, the scanning of the tree. You can go to.
So this one, for example.
So the University of Oregon, which is our alma mater, called us to do a project at their student union building, which I spent and Daniel has spent a lot of time studying and hanging out. It wasn't that nice. It was definitely more of a hut. So when we got there, we're like, oh my God, it's like a totally different place. And as we were scanning some of these incredible trees in the Northwest, we wanted to do it in a medium that we haven't really been exposed to. I mean, I think that's part of one of the pleasures being an artist, is that you get to kind of follow your inquiries and your curiosity, and get to work with the mediums that you don't really know that much about, but it was nevertheless intriguing. So we wanted to do a video, LiDAR video work in a really giant LED screen. So it's about 45 foot tall, and I think the width is about 80 foot or so from one side to another. And it is a scan work of a tree seedling growing from a nurse log, and it continues to grow in sort of LiDAR image. And it goes throughout the day, and at midnight, the tree reaches a full-grown old growth, and it falls. And then it starts all over again. And surprisingly, it was very, not surprisingly, it was very technically new work to us, and we didn't think we had to do a lot of installation. We ended up actually doing a lot of installation on site because the person who was in charge, the construction crew, had never done this type of installation. So we learned a lot throughout the process, and we applied that knowledge to Sound Transit Project. But this is kind of a still image from somewhere along the way, probably, I guess this would be about like maybe 2 in the afternoon or so.
And this is a projection from more than one screen? More than one projector?
Everything black there is a LED screen. So it's eventually the tree fills the whole height and then the whole width.
Oh my God. So
it's just slowly animating. It's very, very slowly.
It's a 45-foot tall LED screen.
Yes.
Wow.
I think altogether
watch your football games on that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we had to do a lot of kind of technical checks, like make sure that it's not Wi-Fi. People can like unload some other images and or words and things. So
I can see that.
we had to do all that stuff. But yeah, it was like I forget 200 and some 30 or so LED screens all combined together.
Oh, okay. So yeah, now of course, this makes. I mean, this is more my bailiwick. We got two spectacular charcoal drawings, and I've spent a lot of time looking at both of them. Of course, the one I saw in person. What is okay? This one. So talk to us about this drawing and what is the structure that the tree is growing out of? I know it's in a parking lot, but I'm a little mystified by the structure.
Okay, so we have been looking at excavated pits for ever since we moved back to Seattle after college. So we've just looking at the construction shoring as a typology and how different it is in different places. And we often invert that. And so we were actually doing a scanning project in Orange County for Orange County Museum of Art. And we were looking at an old airfield there that was being turned into a park. And we came across an area that had where they moved trees from some portion of the airfield to be set aside to be put somewhere else at some point. And there were these enormous, 40-foot by 40-foot containers with 200-year-old, oak trees in them, where they were going to replant them someday. And so we got inspired by that sort of inverted form of an excavation, shoring, and the container. And this was the exact same time we were doing the laser scans of the Oregon forest. And so we basically, because we can take that data and extract from it anything we want, we basically isolated that one tree and drew it faithfully to the scan and then placed it in sort of a landscape where everything has been excavated out to have a parking lot. And this sort of follows in line with a series of drawings that we've done about the Western landscape and its transformation from a natural place to a man-made place.
And then this is the one that I saw at the Fry as part of the Genius Show. And of course, this went along with an installation in the parking lot, which we don't have a picture of, which I know it wasn't your intention, but I saw as Seattle after the earthquake. It was a fragment of asphalt in the parking lot with, I don't know, I think there was a street light. But anyway, I'm just going to read the caption, and then you can just explicate a little bit. It says, it depicts both the beginning and the end moments of late Western influence on the underlying landscape of the Northwest. So how are we seeing that in the drawing, in your explanation?
One of the, I think I just have to share an image of a building we saw together maybe 20 years ago. It was somewhere in Seattle area. I'm so bad with the location. So I'll say some things and you'll be like, oh, that was in Texas. So I hope that's not the case. But I remember going to this area. We used to do this every weekend. We'll just take our cameras. Those are the days when you were taking actually photographs, and we'll take cameras and we'll drive around or take our bicycles and go take photographs of industrial or abandoned buildings and so forth. So this was one of those abandoned buildings. And the rain had come and it had submerged into this building, and there were about 2 to 3 feet deep water into this building, and it was all concrete structure, and it sort of had green tint to the interior of the concrete. And the water was so still that it reflected, of course, what we were seeing. And it just gave me a whole different world. And I just began to imagine what this could be. And I think that's the excitement that I get when I arrive at either at a city or a place or a forest. There is, of course, arriving at a cleared forest, the sadness about what was there and what's no longer there. But there's also excitement about something is happening, if I can put it that way. And I think we wanted to do a drawing about both capturing sort of the sadness and excitement of a beginning and at the end. And I think we find that kind of when we're designing architecture too, is like right at the beginning of when you're conceptualizing is kind of the most interesting moment because it could be anything. You don't have to decide anything. It could be the biggest house or a smallest church or whatever it might have you. And I just think that's just such a moment of possibility. So this drawing is sort of about that, and we wanted to leave it as kind of an open end and put components that it may look like it was flooded or maybe, whatever it might be. I think people who look at those, they come to their own conclusions about what this scene is. And I think we also were really interested in sort of billboard structures and how incredibly strong they are, resisting wind and all these weather conditions in a single pole. And so that's always been our interest. The drawing is about, I don't know, 8 foot wide and 6 foot tall.
Yeah, and that tree, the snag tree in the left-hand corner, definitely, to me it has a direct connection to the next slide, right? The city light piece.
Yeah, I have a little anecdote I should share right now because it was relayed to us by the curator, Joanne Bernadjansker at the Fry. We weren't there when this event occurred, but at one point there was some members of the Duwamish tribe who came through the Fry Genius Show at the time, and he came up to this drawing, and again we never met him, and he goes, "I know that tree, that snag tree on the left side," and indeed it is a real tree. It's one of our favorite trees that you can see on I-90 when you're halfway to Snoqualmie Pass. It's in the median, and it's just a fantastic old growth tree that's just been hit by lightning more times. It's just barely alive, but it is a majestic snag tree, which is just a favorite type of tree in the forest. They have something like 80% of all life in the forest are in snag trees, so we really love them for what they are, providing nourishment and habitat. And so he just noted, he knew the tree right away, just like he knew a face, and he was like, "I know where that is," and which I thought was just incredible, and it's lovely. So.
Anyway, now we can see sort of the sculptural version of the same tree, if I could say that.
And as many of you know, that this is right on Denny Way, Seattle City Light, it's new, I always forget this, it's a substation building to the right. And the story about bringing the energy into the city is to put this transmission towers, you have to, more or less shave the entire swath of landscape to clear out. And so there is something that is lost in order for you to bring energy to serve the people of the city. So we were kind of thinking about that sort of relationship between losing something in order to gain something. So we kind of morphed the shape of the old growth tree into transmission tower. This probably is one of the tallest it is the tallest sculpture we've ever made, and it was quite challenging physically in every aspect of the installation. And we were just talking to some folks before the talk here, that across the street from here, from the sculpture is a senior home, and they were watching us like a hawk, and there were comments about, there are some who loved it, and there were some who hated it. So it made it for a very kind of, lively experience while we were installing.
Lively is one way to put it.
The birds love it. Yeah, it was full of birds when I was there the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, they think it looks like a tree to them. So I just have a comment on this, or a question. Because you are so you are both so gifted as artists, as well as architects, sculptors, and so on. There's a density to the framework that's I found very expressive up at the top, particularly by those branches and so forth. Now, and you're fabricating all that, correct? Yeah. So you're building all that.
Mm-hmm. We do.
Yeah. And there's a ton of filigree and detail that's almost like, to me, it's like pencil lines. It's not structural. It's more just part of your concept, your expressive your expressive language, no?
I think that's accurate. We think about it as drawing in space.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be able to make portions of things yourself and to be able to have control over those elements and where they are. And there's very little of this is pre-planned. I mean, it has to be planned to a certain degree, but a lot of decisions get made in the making, and that's really where the joy of making happens. And so I think, and then there's an aspect of you have to pre-make it, and then you have to lift it, mount it, and then once it's up, it would be really nice to be able to change it again, but you don't always get that opportunity. But this piece is one of the few pieces that we actually had a collaborator with. The internal transmission tower core structure was made by a steel fabricator, Northwest Steel Fab in Spokane, and that interior portion was galvanized there. We made with about 4, maybe 5 assistants over about a year time, everything else, all of the branches and everything that's not that internal square transmission tower shape. So and then everything had to fit back together. We had to take everything out to Spokane to galvanize it and bring it back and finish it. So it was a super elaborate cross-state process.
Yeah, it's Denny, Fairview area. Yeah, it's really, if you haven't seen it, and it's worth parking and walking around it, obviously it's quite spectacular. Okay, I'm just going to go and then go back, and you could talk to us about this. And I just have to say, you like the sort of urban, I don't know, detritus, the urban detail that we often overlook or ignore. And I would say that's true of this particular project.
Yeah, I think, when we started doing scanning work in Rome, they had this kind of almost like a policeman with us, because at that time I think the scanning machine was $250,000, and they were, lending it to us, who has never used this machine before. So there was this gentleman was a Greek descent, and he was quite a character, and he will be with us all the time, making sure that it doesn't disappear. And then after a few outings, he's like, you know how to do it. You don't need me anymore. So he let us a freedom to just kind of go and scan whatever we wanted. Our project in Rome was titled Looking at Nothing, and we wanted to capture the void space, negative space, the space that are neglected. And of course, in order for you to capture the void, you have to capture everything solid around it so you can see the void. And so in the process, we found out, we got to observe all these tiny things that are adhere to building. And we just became, we fell in love with those structures, and we realized, I think later we'll show our scanning work in New York, and we'll share what our findings of when you're looking at, in a city like New York, really most of what you're seeing is sky and ground and all the stuff that is attached to building. You really see very little of the building. So your actual spatial experiences through these things, parasitic things that are attached to the buildings. So it became very meaningful findings for us. And this is a scan of a parking hut. And I think those of you who are old enough to have been in this area long enough, in the South Lake Union area, there were a lot of parking lots, and there were tiny little parking huts and attendants there. So it's one of those that we scanned. And then the next slide shows that we turned it into a sculpture in front of the Amazon office buildings. And we wanted to just kind of introduce, I think there's this element of nostalgia, certainly, but we wanted to introduce our history as the city, what scale of history, what scale of the city we were, and what sort of structures we had before these, 20-story glass buildings that are occupying the entire sort of area of South Lake Union.
But you can't walk into it.
You
Yes.
can.
Oh, you can?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
it has
okay.
a real functioning door,
Oh,
which
wow.
I think the owner is currently zip-tied closed, but, feel free to walk inside.
Oh, okay.
You
Yeah,
can go
it
right
was
in
made
the
to
window
do.
there.
Okay. Now, if you've gone, and I guess a few of us have gone through the international border between, the Blaine Peace Arch border recently for obvious reasons. But next time you go through their border, they've got a fabulous piece there that it's much, I guess you see it when you're southbound as opposed to northbound. But it's the same vocabulary as this piece in Texas. And I won't tell you about it, it could be a surprise. But next time you go at the border, you'll recognize this lattice work. And this piece is in Texas. You're not, and who knows, it snowed in Texas.
Yeah, the world is changing. You never know what's going to happen. So this happened, I guess, was it last year or a year before?
Yeah, last one.
And we had heard that there was a snowstorm there, so we asked somebody, the local there, this is in Lubbock, Texas, please go and take a picture. We want a picture of that structure. The title of this piece is called Oblique Intersection, and you can kind of see the intersection of the architectural component intertwining with one another. And we wanted to build a piece that were oblique in angles. So up until this piece, we were doing everything orthogonal. So you can, when you see the doorway, it's orthogonal. With this piece, I think it was, is it 30-degree oblique angle. So it's not aligned until you get to that oblique angle, and then you get to see the very crisp edge. And we were really thrilled with it. It made for a very challenging fabrication, but we were really happy with the result.
Gary, how are we doing on time?
Oh, we're doing great because we're in Brooklyn.
Alas.
Yeah. So we're going to spend the last 20 minutes looking at the station art. And apparently this part of town was really called Brooklyn at one point. Do you have any idea why?
Yeah, so at this era, when the area was forested north of the Ship Canal, developers would get a hold of a giant piece of property, and then they would plat it out and create their townships. They weren't part of Seattle, they were their own cities. And in this case, James Moore, in the 1800s, wanted to create Brooklyn, Washington, and he had in mind that it was going to be an industrial city across the water from Manhattan or Seattle, and so he platted it all out with Manhattan and Brooklyn street names. Shortly after that, I don't think the grid stayed, but not enough was built out when the University of Washington was granted the land adjacent, and then ownership changed. All the street names changed, except for Brooklyn Avenue remained, although it's one block over from where it used to be. So that's why Brooklyn Avenue is called Brooklyn Avenue in the U District.
Oh, and University Avenue was called Broadway.
Yep.
Oh, man, they should have left it Broadway. Oh, we already have a Broadway, all right. Okay, back to LiDAR, I guess.
This was one of our earlier scan from Rome. And I think it was really interesting because a lot of buildings look alike, and those of you who've been there, and we start kind of comparing the building that is sitting across the street from one another, and a lot of times the windows aligned, about 30% of the windows aligned. So we imagined like if you're standing at that window, then you can see all the way through to the other window. And so we did this piece, removed all the sort of building away from the structures, and then just kept the windows and what it did. And I think of course a lot of the life of the building is seen through the windows of people inside, and I think that had a kind of effect on somewhere in the back of our minds as we kind of formulated our ideas for the Brooklyn Fragment Brooklyn piece.
So just as a reference on time, this was 2008 or so. I think we were working on this project. We'd been working with LiDAR for about 6 months, and in 2010, we were invited to apply for the subway project, so not that long later. And so we showed this slide because it was, I think, figuring in our mind pretty heavily about how windows contribute to the experience of a city, and how much what an important role they play in terms of your public interface on the sidewalk or in the street, and what you're allowed to understand about what's happening inside of a building. So this was actually a video because it's a three-dimensional scan, the video just rotates this series of windows, and they're true scale and proportion to one another. But we're just showing a slide here, not to bore you with all these videos. We'll show one or two later.
And I guess we should tell people that the key element of the sculpture installation in Seattle at the Link Station are windows. Yeah, so, that's sort of foreshadowing what we're going to see in a few minutes. Yeah, I was joking that this reminded me of the Banksy piece that self-shredded, which I know had nothing to do with this, nothing whatsoever. Yeah, it's called Adoration Turning Yellow, and I'm totally baffled. I'm not sure what this piece is, how this relates to your, the windows and leading up to the station art.
Well, I don't know if we need to get into it too much. This was a personal piece. It is a freestanding window. It's something you can just carry like a painting and place on a wall. It's backlit, and it's made with string and paint, and it's a fictional window. But this is in Rome. We had a little exhibition while we were there, and we were thinking about these sort of dissected building components, and so it was just a single piece that we made. That went into a collection while we were there, and we thought it might be nice to show a smaller sculptural object that sort of prefigures the Brooklyn work.
I think I was also stuck with this sort of language of when people describe, light pouring out of the window, and I was just trying to almost like a vomit of a light coming out the window. And I think we were also just working with a lot of filigree and strings and lines at the time. And yeah, it was just kind of thinking about how much of the information that you see of the interior of somebody's living space through the window by when the light is on. Yeah.
Okay, there's the machine.
And there's the generator, and right behind that is the giant thing we had to push around that held the laptop and all the soft packing for it. But yeah, you can get a sense. This is kind of like a middle generation LiDAR machine by Leica. So it only weighed like 40 pounds. And we had a fellowship in New York for a summer in 2011, right at the same time that we were generating the idea for the Brooklyn project. And we were scanning big pieces of Manhattan as part of a research project with the Van Allen Institute. So this is just a little, to give everybody a sense of what we were working with. We would head off in the morning from the Institute with our little rolly cart there and roll it as far as we could get away, and then we would start scanning our way back to the Institute at nighttime. So we got a big piece of Lower Manhattan and Chinatown, and lots of Midtown, and lots of Brooklyn, and lots of Harlem.
Boy, it looks heavy.
It is heavy. Yeah.
I'll go through this sequence pretty quickly. We just wanted to share with you what we were looking at. I talked about that a little bit about when you look at a building, so sort of in your cone of vision when you look at that building. And the next slide will show you, that's what you're looking at. And if you go to the following slide, if you take away all this ground and sky and all the things that are adhered to the building, is really very little of the building that you're seeing. And of course, even little you experience because you don't really get to go into all of those buildings. And so then we started looking at those missing parts, which show, the next slide shows, of all the things that are attached to the building that are, negligent information, duct, canopies, signage, and, mysterious boxes and all that is adhered. And we start focusing on those as kind of our interest and start making smaller sculptures and drawings about them.
So in a way, these are the elements that deconstruct the architecture, right? Because the architects if you really were the architect of one of those buildings, you come back, 20 years later, you can't see the building anymore with all the accretions. And you guys are focusing on the accretions.
Right.
Well, I think in New York, it was hard to ignore, right?
Yeah, it kind of makes up the city. It makes up your experience of the city. it's different than Rome. It's different than Seattle, where everything is a glass box, and it may take some centuries to attach stuff to it, but it's happening. And even in our experience designing stuff, you come back a year later and you're like, damn it, can't believe they put a sign like right on front of that, and then it starts to happen. It's just they call it the way the buildings learn, but it's also the way that they start to become a different creature entirely. But it makes your experience of Manhattan special because it's so peculiar how it got retrofitted over the last couple of centuries, and that to us was sort of a revelation, and it came to us because of looking at through these LiDAR images. We were just like trying to look at the space between buildings. We had this grand idea about, well, how big is the sidewalk, and how wide are they, and how tall, and what does that feel like, and how is that different than Rome? And then we were like, but look at all this stuff. Like, we got to get this stuff out of here. And we started peeling it off, and then we were like, this is actually pretty interesting stuff. And then so that's where we were looking at its shapes and what it's made of. And I have to say that at least in our training, that was very, it was definitely like, it went against all of the doctrine of an architect, but it was highly interesting, and started to open our eyes in a different way.
These young rebels, I don't know what you can do with them. Okay, oh man, this is so cool. So this is the fun with, once you have a 3D information, right, then you get to do all this cool stuff with it, like this animation.
This ended up being an album cover for one of your friends, a jazz band.
Oh wait, let's look at that again. Yeah, I think that's some. Oh, maybe I have to come at it from the other direction. See if I can get the animation to go. Yeah. So this is all. Yeah. So what are we looking at?
It's Cortlandt Alley, if I'm not mistaken, and we had to stand there for about 4 hours scanning, and it was a particularly hot day, I remember, and it felt like the jean was melting onto my skin. So you get kind of really lethargic and like start to fall asleep standing up doing that. But there were so many fire escapes, and now you don't really do that in modern buildings, but it was just lovely. At certain light, you can see all the steel lighting up in a certain way, and you can kind of concentrate on the fire escapes only. And so we kind of, again, like we did with the windows, took away all the building information and concentrate on the fire escape and how much it added to the character, the language, and the experience of the building by having those attached steel fire escapes.
So if you don't mind, I'm just going to go ahead to get to the station. Oh, man, don't you wish you still had this to have scanned? Yeah, you could have done your project based on Seattle instead of New York. This is the Ave. There's the University Bookstore.
I think this is from 1940.
Mm-hmm. Maybe earlier.
Yeah, It's hard to believe how dense and amazing it was.
Oh, yeah.
Streetcar
But it has that aspect of New York too. Like the buildings are festooned with neon signs and garlands, and it's a very electric in its presentation. I think there's something about it that has a density that the current Ave doesn't quite have anymore.
Yeah.
But also, I think when we were looking, a lot of what we do is research, and so when we came across this slide, we're like, oh, look at that public transit going right down the middle of the Ave, and where did it go? And then since we were working on the adjacent block and thinking about the density that's going to be coming to the University District with its the new up zone and the 20 and 30-story buildings that are coming, we started to think a little bit about how the city is changing and what aspects and how it related to what we were looking at in Brooklyn. So again, back in 2010, we were. It's funny to think about now what state of mind we were in at that time. We were in Manhattan designing this project, but it was under Brooklyn Avenue, and so that's where a lot of those ideas were forming from that experience at the Van Allen Institute.
I think those the drawings, and this is showing, I think many of you who have traveled in Europe and Asia, and certainly this country, from the train, you get to kind of get a glimpse of apartments and people inside of them, and some are just very close. I remember going to some European cities, and you can literally like hand over something from the train. And so we started to think about that, a brief encounter with the strangers that you really don't get to meet from the moving, transportation. And we thought it was sort of appropriate to use that as a, base to make our sculptures. So we concentrated on the windows, the stairs connecting them. This was our kind of a, rendering for what we were envisioning. We also we didn't want it to be a very kind of a static sculpture on the wall, because the context was so different and everything is sort of moving all the time. And also it was, we thought in a strange way that the commission was going to age us 10 years, because it wasn't going to be realized 10 years later. So we were like, oh my God, are we going to be still behind that work? Are we going to be still interested in making that work? And so we wanted to put some unknown part into the mix, in our proposal was to create video work of some sort about people that are behind the window. And so this is a couple of fabrication shot.
Sorry.
No problem. At our shop with our crew there.
That's Liz Claggett and Amanda Pickler, who have been helping us for the last couple years. And you can see the full scale of the piece there. It's about a person size, and this entire piece is made from stainless steel. There's a kind of egg crate structure that supports it. It's fairly lightweight, and then on top of that are these pressed forms that are made of woven wire mesh, kind of like a tea strainer, but very soft and can be folded over wooden forms. So we made positive and negative shapes and pressed them to achieve this sort of Italianate detail that you would find in Brooklyn. And so they're fictional windows sort of generated from things that we were looking at.
This kind of shows that little aluminum frame, or the steel frame you can see on the wall, and there was an armature to hang the sculpture they were making. And the sculpture had another substructure that can hold the stainless steel mesh. It was kind of a see-through mesh. It was hard to see it on the last sculpture, but it was a new material that we found in the last several years as we were doing various projects, and it was perfect because it was strong but really light, and so that those were hung or mounted onto those frames. And this shot was just showing kind of the scale of the wall that we were working with, and you can see at the top of the image a big concrete beam, and then we had an additional another 30 feet or so on top of that.
Yeah, I didn't realize the windows were that big, so it was interesting to see the shot in your fabrication. And you fabricated all the elements?
Yep. With we have 5 assistants at our shop, so 2 of us plus 5, 7 of us were making those. There were hundreds of components to put it together.
Oh, okay. Now I get it. So Dan was talking to me about this before we came downstairs. So this is the studio that you used to shoot the videos. Oh, I somehow thought this was in the station. That's why I was confused. Okay, talk to us about what we're seeing in this slide.
Okay, so that is Gretchen Yanover, Annie's cello teacher from long ago. We invited her to be an actress for the piece. We had to recreate the full-scale window, and we needed to shoot it from a low elevation so we could get the perspective correct. When you walk up to a window, you need to recede correctly, otherwise everything would be weird when seen from down below. So we had to shoot it from several different angles depending on what height the window was at, and so it became necessary to create this elevated stage set. So we rented a warehouse last year and then set it at the camera at different heights, and then brought in live actors and non-actors to come and basically act out domestic scenes that they might do in their own apartments and houses. And so there are certain recurring themes that you'll see. There's a lot of contemplative things going on. There's reading, writing, sewing, thinking, playing music, but it's very ambient. And then we slowed the films down, and so it's not intended to be fast moving. It's intended to be something that you can kind of sit in the chairs at the station while you're waiting for the next train and just sort of zone out. And slowly things change. There are adjacencies that occur, and there's actually quite a lot going on because there are 10 or 12 windows, and they each have 10 or 12 hours of video in them, and they're all different. And so there's a tremendous amount of randomness that's occurring, and hopefully you won't see the same thing the same time once it's all up and running.
I noticed candles seem to be a recurring image. Any particular? Yeah, I guess. I mean, we'll probably see that in a minute. Anything about the candles? Did you want something to kind of link the windows? Is that the concept with the candles?
And also that time is passing, and it's something that you do to take care. You do it to bring life and fire into your space, and it's just a wonderful element that I think Annie and I both value, and it's just a quiet, meditative thing that you might do alone, and so there's lots of aspects of that, the gesture of lighting a candle and blowing a candle out that we felt like that would help work with the contemplative ideas in the video.
I mentioned to Annie in an email that when I was standing there looking at it the other day, and I'm sure this is going to happen all the time, maybe you anticipated it, the people next to me were looking at it, and somebody was saying, I don't get it. People are living in the station? I mean, I guess you're prepared for that. Yeah, because, it's pretty realistic.
Well, it's just amazing, I think, what people bring to the artwork itself. We get a lot of comments while we're installing, especially in the public space, and with this piece too, with all the contractors and various people, tradesmen who are working. It's very, in strange ways, it's very indicative to us how successful the piece is going to be during the process of installing. The conversation is really enlightening for us. And also just
especially contractors, they're very raw. They'll tell you exactly what they think right in front of you.
And I think people bring out parts that perhaps it was not particularly in your mind, but it just makes it rich. Just like you might create a red piece and somebody may see a blue, and I think that's wonderful. I love that, in fact. And so I haven't heard that from people saying, are there people living in it? But I did hear from a friend we asked to come and be part of the video, and she wasn't comfortable in the fact that it made look voyeuristic, and I was like, okay, I can respect that, that wasn't our intention, that, to spy on other people, but I could see how people can see that too. So I think it's okay. I welcome that difference of opinion.
It also should be noted that just as a little side note, that in each film scene, the person in the window also looks at the people on the station. So they turn their attention out, and so they'll look up and down, the street, and they'll focus directly at the platform. So we should see real engagement, like once in a while with every actor and actress.
So no, I think we actually get to. Okay, maybe it's the next slide. We get to actually see maybe some of the videos in action. So we're just looking at this is just another detail.
Just a close up.
But you can't quite get that close, right? We're a little bit farther away when we're on the platform.
There is a little staircase that you can take that gets you up at this level. So this photograph is from that.
Oh, okay.
Which is not a view that we knew we were going to get because that stair wasn't supposed to be there. They added it at the last minute, which means the last year.
Yeah.
But they were worried that for some reason the station wasn't designed with a stair. And they found out that the escalators break down, and that they better put a stair in there. So anyway, we had to change the piece pretty dramatically because the stair came in late. There was a lot more pieces way up high, and so we made a last-minute change to bring a lot more of the material down below that horizontal concrete beam.
Okay, so
Should start here. Yeah, there it goes.
oh, yay!
So this is just kind of stitches of videos we wanted to show. Strangely, the video, we were just down there at the station, it's stuck. It's not moving right now, so we have to go address that hopefully this Friday. I think the data cable is somehow short or something. But these are the scenes that we filmed, and these are various actors and non-actors. And we wanted to just, like Dan said, wanted to be a very contemplative moment, a moment that you just kind of veg out and look. I think I do that a lot, when I'm walking down a foreign city or even my own city, you just kind of look. You're not really looking exactly at a single person behind that window, but you're sort of looking through them and kind of, be in that moment and lost in the moment. And I think candles did that so beautifully for us. I think every time you light a candle, you kind of can't help yourself but to look into the flame. And when it was being blown out, the trail of smoke that it created was just so beautiful, and it was long lasting. It kind of made you freeze in that moment and kind of enjoy that pattern that it was creating.
Yeah, no, I should say that this is not, this is a collage. So, I mean, this is what you see in the individual windows, but in the previous slides, we saw what the actual sculpture looks like. And so this is just focusing on the imagery. And Daniel was telling me that we can just kind of leave this up on the screen, right? It'll just keep running. How many hours of video? You have no
hours
idea,
and hours
right?
and hours, yeah.
Hundreds of hours of video. I mean, if we did the math, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
A couple hundred, I would say.
maybe 100 hours.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's definitely, if you sped it at normal speed, it would be half that time. So it takes its time. There's nothing going on here that's fast. So you're not going to miss anything if you turn your head away, for sure. But we were very I think respectful as transit riders ourselves of wanting to be. We know what it's like to sit at a station and have nothing to look at, and because we've spent enough time in foreign cities to know what that subway experience is like. You're in a very cold. It's always 56 degrees down there. It's gray. Everything is gray, and it's going to get dirty, and so we wanted you to have something besides your phone to look at, something that brought you life, that reminded you of life above ground, and that the university is a place of learning and expanding your horizons. And so we wanted that experience to come through in the video, so that it made it more humane. I remember actually the very first idea that we had for this project was a coffee shop on the platform. And it was going to be stationed by a barista who would be there to serve coffee year-round, all day, all night.
Oh, what could
and
possibly
they
go wrong with
rejected
that?
it. And I was like, well, that's so great to have some human contact down there, but didn't happen.
Okay, anyway, so we're just going to leave this up. This is the last of our slides, but I think we've had a wonderful tour through the work of Daniel and Annie. And I'm sure several of you at least are motivated to go ride the rails and see this for yourself. But it's not, think about public art. It's not going anywhere. It's part of the landscape, and it's a big responsibility, I think, because we're going to be living with all these public art projects for decades to come. Okay, anyway, so thank you very much, and let's give them a round of applause. And I guess this will be our Q&A part of the program. And apparently,
are there questions in person too, or just?
Well,
Okay, so much for.
Oh, so wait, so we have a technological snafu with the Q&A? I mean, we actually have to do it the old-fashioned way?
I see a couple of hands there. Yeah.
My question right off the bat is about the technology involved in trying to keep the station running, and you say you've already had trouble. And I've seen more than one piece that involves video or other things that ends up being, or any kind of movement really, ends up languishing after the first couple of years because the artists are no longer paid to repair it. They don't want to get involved, and I heard a curator once, or a conservator from a museum one time talking about the horrors of trying to deal with digital art as a conservator. So what do you have planned for this?
Excellent question. Boy, have we gotten that question before. I'll have you know that Sound Transit is highly averse to doing anything with technology in art. They had some bad experiences in the past, but you know, here we are. It's up, which shows you that they're open to change. They're willing to take risk, and also hopefully this will be a successful project, and they can continue to embrace new technology and new art forms as it comes along. I mean, it is a risk. There's no doubt about it. We did our best to future-proof this. We had 10 years to work on it. So when we began looking at the technology behind it, it was still pretty nascent, and it's come a long way in 10 years, and we knew that the cost would come down. Initially, we knew there was no way we were going to be able to afford it, but we just hoped that the cost would keep getting lower and lower, and the technology got easier and simpler, and now it is truly affordable and truly replaceable, and it's, I think, very straightforward. We have a really good system. It's all sitting on a PC computer that we'll have a duplicate of that, and if it breaks down, we'll just swap it out. We did have trouble with the electrician. Unfortunately, the cable can only be a certain length. It can only be 300 feet long, and for some reason they ran it to be 428 feet long. So they're all too long, and so there's a lot of issues related to that somehow we'll have to fix it, that aspect of it. But once the cable length is fixed, the technology, it's just a piece of software on a PC, and we expect that will be around in the future. And the screens themselves are, they're on a 1 meter by 2 meter increment, and we expect that metric system will be around in the future. And so it should be a pretty common size. And there, before this time, there was a lot of weird sizes of these modules, but now they've gotten pretty universal on these half-meter increments. And if the whole thing has to be replaced, we've got lots of backup parts, and they're committed to supporting the project over time. And it's just a matter of making sure that there's adequate manuals and training. It's not difficult. It took us a little while to figure out how to design a simple system, but it's easy. So we have some good faith in it once we get some of the kinks out. The problem right now is that the computer is sitting in a server rack in an electrical cabinet on a mezzanine level in the station. To get into that room requires a 2-week permit. So if something goes on, like right now, it's frozen, and we need to get down there. We've only been allowed to see this up there and to fiddle with it 3 times. And so every time we want to go back in, it takes 2 weeks to go back in. So Friday is our next opportunity to go in and figure out why it hung up and solve that problem. So we think it's most likely the data cable, because we knew it was a problem, but we'll figure it out. It's not.
There was a hand here, and then I'll get you next there. Yeah.
So my question was part of that, the technological maintenance, but what about the other maintenance, like for the big tower at the City Light Park? Is that built into the project for keeping it clean and bird droppings and all?
Can everybody hear the question? She's just asking about maintenance for the physical projects like the tower, the City Light Tower.
So commissioning agency usually have a budget that they operate under, is part of it. It's never enough. Maintenance budget is never enough. And it relates back to the previous question for me is, I think if there's a will, there's the answer to all these things. And I also want to say that, right now at this moment, the technology is a video, but in next moment, next year, next week, another artist will come up with another interesting way of sharing ideas in a different and new media. And that we won't know. I hope that all the commissioning agency will be open. I think we all talk about the future, and I think future can only come if you can be open to unknown. And so I think with that comes a responsibility of, commitment to really preserving the art form. And yeah, it's once, you make the artwork and it's sort of like, a children going away or something that we can only touch so much and we can only take care of it so much. I think the commissioning agency has to own the next part of the responsibility. So I'm thankful for those who have commissioned us, who's been taking care of our work, and I'm thankful for people that are open to this new medium, new ways of looking at things, whatever it may be. Who knows what next problem that we're going to have to address.
One thing I can say back to the earlier question is that video is not going away anytime soon, and it's like it's everywhere, and Sound Transit has it all over the place in their information panels, and so they already have systems for keeping video up and running. That wasn't the case, 10, 15 years ago, but now it's an everyday thing. So it should be something that they can maintain. It's not difficult. And then off to the point of the tall sculpture piece, like we have to answer to the city about how it gets maintained and what longevity they can expect out of the piece. Most public art, for those of you who don't know, they expect it to last somewhere between 40 to 60 years. Anything beyond that, they expect something will have to happen. It'll either be decommissioned or recycled, or they'll maintain it. So you can see that happening now in the news. You'll see pieces that are not loved, or they'll start to not be maintained, and then they'll be removed at some point, or and sometimes destroyed. So it's the nature of cities. Things adapt to the changing times. And our piece at the substation, we found coatings that would be guaranteed for 60 years. They have instructions if there is like a lot of bird droppings on it, and it became a problem that that the coating can handle power washing as many times as they want, and the company will guarantee that it can handle it. But what do we know? 50 years from now, who knows what will happen? But we did expect there to be the birds on that for sure. So it's holding up so far.
Yeah, the birds like it. And, Michelangelo's David, they got around the problem by building a special rotunda so they could move it inside and save it for the generations.
I'm getting a...
Bird droppings are part of buildings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last question. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to congratulate you on the University Station. By far, all the mass transit stations I've been in, just the most interesting. And I feel it's a little bit of a comment, and I have a question. But I really couldn't believe that I didn't make the connection between, the New York look of that station and the windows, which it did. It was obvious when I was walking there that it was related to Brooklyn Ave, just above. And so, I thought that was just really ingenious. And it is wonderful that maybe Sound Transit will come in there and do seasonal things like Christmas tree lights.
No.
They'll need a 2-week permit.
So what I wanted to ask, and I've always kind of, when I looked at it, I'm talking about the high-tension tree at the substation, it always occurred to me that, I would have thought that you would have made it dark down below and light up above in order to kind of stretch the distance out, but you reversed it. Was that intentional? But I mean, it was just sort of one of the things I was wondering on that.
You know-
And it's a terrific sculpture. I love it. It's really great sitting next to that new futuristic substation.
It's funny how sort of a simple and abstract thinking during the process just becomes part of the sculpture. And I remember beginning, we were making smaller models of the sculpture once we started thinking about it. And it's always been sort of the light to dark. And I think maybe we were thinking about when you go to forest, when you see the kind of outline of the tree, it's always sort of dark and against the sky. So I think that was sort of embedded in our head as we were formulating idea for the piece there. And I think we were also thinking about, the atmospheric conditions when you go to a forest. There's always kind of a hazy, feel to it or look to it, like it's foggy underground. So I think the combination of that must have entered our head, but from the very beginning, it's always stayed as a kind of a white to turning into a dark blue. And we tried to kind of change the color during the process toward the end of the project and see if we wanted to change the color. I mean, we entertained, green, and we entertained doing from dark to light, and it just didn't feel right. So we stayed with the color that we ended up with. It's kind of a simple question.
Okay, I'm getting the
Answer.
high sign from the staff, which means that it's closing time. Thank you all so much for joining us. They cut down all the trees and put them in the tree museum. Paved paradise, put them in the parking lot. God, that's all the imagery we've just been looking at. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you all.
This is great. Okay, and thank you, Town Hall.